TowerClimb is a video game. More than that, it's a game where you climb a tower. Yeah, that's apt. It's like if you named an FPS Gun Shoot. TowerClimb is in a class of games I might call game games, or maybe for a less ridiculous term, arcade action games. Something that has no real pretensions outside of presenting you with a challenge and folding its arms with a grin. The tower is not a representation of depression, and the climber's 32 pixels are not an allegory for the horrors of living in an American suburb. There's just a tower, go climb it. Despite being relatively obscure, I do have a bit of time in it. Now you might think that this would make me a little biased, and yeah, maybe you're right, but probably not as much as you'd think. TowerClimb released on Steam in 2015, but started development all the way back in 2010. It was programmed using Construct, which is a visual programming language more akin to something like the Warcraft map editor than a traditional programming language. But hey, the Warcraft map editor gave us Dota, and that concept turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry. So it's not really a criticism of the tool, it's just a long roundabout way for me to complain about the fact that the options menu doesn't have any volume sliders, meaning I had to edit around the music always being on. Also, the game minimizes for a split second between levels. There is a good dose of indie jank. Coincidentally, the last game I talked about, Marrow, was also programmed with Construct. If you're curious, go watch the video, but let's just say that TowerClimb doesn't require nearly as much mental exercise to determine whether I liked it or not. Anyway, TowerClimb is described as an action roguelike, which means, yep, it's got permadeath and procedural level generation. Now I know some people just rolled their eyes at yet another indie roguelite with pixel graphics on Steam, but how TowerClimb stands out from the rest is by being really frickin' hard. And in a genre that seems to confuse difficulty with content, that's quite an accomplishment. TowerClimb's closest analog would be something like Spelunky, except in that game you go down instead of up, so big difference. As for the controls, you can run, jump, climb, hang, grab, throw, and even walk. But why would you ever walk? Seriously, I've developed an iron pinky finger from holding down shift for an hour straight playing this game. The game pretends there's a reason by making you jump higher when walking and jump further while running, but even though it's probably unintentional, there's a way to just do both at the same time. Alright, I'm getting things out of order here. I've hardly gone over the controls and I'm already talking about some hidden mechanic. On top of your basic movements, you have 4 potions. You can buy them all from the witch in exchange for any golden berries you might find. The jump potion lets you jump again mid-air, the corrode potion blows up blocks as well as enemies, and the teleport potion lets you teleport a short distance. And you'll never guess what the revive potion does. Unlike the other potions, you can only hold 1 at a time. 2 at a time if you're on easy mode, but calling it easy mode is kind of a joke. Also, revive potions won't even save you from everything. There's a handful of instant kills like falling in lava or jumping out of the tower. Whenever you die, the game gives you plenty of time to soak it all in. Now, not only can you grab and throw items, but you can store them as well. You can carry up to 6 items and take them out whenever you need them. There are some items you can find that passively help you, but unlike Spelunky, you don't just have them forever. You need to dedicate an entire inventory slot to them for them to work. If there's something else really important you need to carry, you'll just need to yeet it. Speaking of yeeting, there is one last mechanic I need to cover. Item jumping. If you throw an item down, it'll push you upwards. And this creates the interesting mechanic of carrying around a ton of garbage just so you can throw it at your feet and save your potions for emergencies. Controls are a little complicated. The game's hard, but it's more of an endurance kind of hard. Compared to something like Super Meat Boy where you might die 50 times in 1 minute, in TowerClimb you'll die after like 30 minutes of arduous climbing, then turn the game off. What really drove me to keep playing TowerClimb was just the urge to see the next area. And on that note, I'm going to be talking about all the areas. Each area has its own unique challenge, but you can be assured that they all involve climbing. And after 3 levels, you'll get to a new area. Like this area, it's got dripping lava, lava geysers, and big pools of insta-killing lava. This game is an interesting case to me. I won't go as far as saying it's like it was made just for me, but it does sort of feel that way. You don't see games like this too often, so it's worth examining. The easiest way to explain its relative obscurity would be its difficulty, but that's not quite enough for me. There's plenty of games out there that are rather popular in spite of their difficulty, perhaps the most salient examples being the Souls series and TowerClimb's closest comparison, Spelunky. Difficulty in video games is a broad topic, but it should suffice to say that difficulty alone isn't enough to raise your game to prominence or likewise doom it to obscurity. Originally, the main purpose of difficulty in video games was to part innocent children from their allowances in the arcades of the 70s and 80s, but it would eventually become the most efficient way to pad out the playtime of game cartridges that could hold less memory than a single second of this video. These days, developers generally want their games to be played by more people and not less, so difficulty designs like that have mostly fallen by the wayside in favor of broader markets, and by logical extension, broader access to money. But there are still some games that make their difficulty the main focus. This has mostly fallen to the realms of the indie developer, where targeting super specific markets like the hardcore difficulty junkie is a little more viable. And just like the classic games of yore, difficulty remains an easy way to increase playtime without also increasing dev time. That being said, even the hardest core gamers aren't content to just bang their head on the same impossible challenge over and over again, unless it's for epic Twitch views. And so developers took a page out of the rather venerable genre of roguelikes, or games that are like Rogue. They realized they can make their gameplay more engaging if the challenge was more dynamic by adding procedural generation, which also isn't very demanding on dev time. As one of the last living humans who plays actual roguelikes as opposed to what some people have taken to calling roguelites, I could probably talk about this topic indefinitely. But the end of that little history lesson brings us back to here, TowerClimb. At the end of 18 levels and 5 areas, we've found this place. So after all the effort to get up here, this magic lady shows up and starts dropping fish and rats on our heads. Which is, kind of rude, to be honest. In contrast to actually getting up here, this fight is pretty easy. You just hang on the ceiling the whole time. After surviving the rat menace, you will be given the incredibly difficult task of putting 2 orbs on blocks. The timer is incredibly generous. You need to try to lose here. Then she floods the room with lava, but all you gotta do is hang at the top and wait there. She brings you to the top, and you're free to go. This place is a little different from all the other levels we've been climbing. Nothing's trying to kill us for one. There's this statue complaining about his missing eyes, but I don't have time to worry about that, I'm busy. From up here, it looks like we're at the top of the tower, but if we ride this balloon, we'll find out that there's even more tower directly above us. There are 2 chapters in this game, and this is the end of Chapter 1. You might assume that that means we're halfway done, but then you'd be wrong. This is where the game gets a little weird. Up until now, we've been climbing the same 12-block-wide tower, but no longer. The magic lady's just chilling up here and asks why we're so insistent on climbing this stupid tower, to which I must reply, because it's there. Basically, they're tired of idiots like us climbing all over their furniture, and that she didn't kill us earlier because it would be more fun to watch us die in Zardo's tower. And she must be having lots of fun because that seems to happen a lot. But who's Zardo? Well, I'll tell you, just as soon as I finish dying. Yeah, that's an instant kill. Doesn't it look like I should have grabbed the side instead of getting crushed? Whatever, back to the start. That took me about 30 minutes. Sometimes in the lower towers, this wizard shows up. You can make him go away by hitting him 6 times, but if he hits you once, he steals all your stuff. Yep, that's Zardo. If this happens, you might as well give up. In a rare display of mercy, after reaching Chapter 2, the game lets you start from there. But overall, it's actually harder to beat the game from the checkpoint, because not only do you miss out on the chance to find equipment like gloves, there are some extremely powerful items that can only be obtained in Chapter 1. Namely, from crafting. Yeah, crafting. If you give this dude 2 items, he makes something out of them. This is kind of bad design, because the only way to know the recipes is to look them up. There's no way you'd ever figure out on your own that Zardo's wand plus a spring turns into one of the most powerful items in the game. Once you know how to use it, the King's Hook gets you around pretty much every obstacle in the game. It even doubles as a weapon. Still, having something that powerful doesn't make you invincible. The point is, even if it makes you less likely to die, spending the extra 30 minutes isn't always worth it. Anyway, back on topic. While some people avoid difficult games, there are more than enough people who play specifically because they're difficult, and so the question becomes not how difficult the game is, but how effectively it reaches that demographic. That means we need to look at everything else supporting the challenge instead of the challenge itself. TowerClimb, I must say, is not very effective in that regard. The first thing some might point out would be the graphics. They're not terrible, but in the modern age, some might call them economical. Personally, I don't mind them, especially in genres like this where the gameplay is king. But as a wise man once asked, what's the most important part of any game? Well, being able to play it. And that brings us to the controls. The controls are, and I say this as someone who has more or less mastered them, pretty bad. Granted, I've only ever used keyboard controls, but this issue is the same on controllers. There are a lot of buttons you need to fumble with. Beyond the directional controls, you have 3 potion buttons, sprint, jump, store, and moving forwards and backwards through your inventory. It isn't so much that you need to remember all these buttons, but more that you need to remember them under stress. Even so, the game still needs to condense the controls by sharing sprint with grab/drop and jump with attack. If you ever want to hit anything with a sword, you're gonna be jumping around like a maniac. Comparatively, Spelunky has only 4 major buttons: jump, attack, ropes, and bombs. Spelunky also simplifies its controls by making you duck and jump to pick up an item, and then from that moment forward it's glued to your hands until you throw it with attack or put it back down. This means the difficulty is emergent from relatively few buttons, making the learning curve more gradual. Even though you're interfacing with the game through a keyboard, at some point you forget the keys entirely as the neurological distance between prompting an action and your hands obeying that action becomes close to nil. This distance between prompt and action is the biggest factor in what we might call immersion, and the more complicated the controls, the longer it takes for this muscle memory to set in. Having watched several people attempt to play TowerClimb for the first time, I can say that this sets in extremely slowly, and leaves most people abundantly aware of their keyboards as they're fumbling through their inventory. This hyper-awareness moves the controls away from complicated and more towards frustrating. That being said, having an inventory does increase the depth and complexity of the game, and that does make the overall experience better. But only for those who spent the time to actually learn the controls, which in turn makes it less likely that anyone will actually get to that point. It's a bit of a catch-22. Everything struggles with this line between accessibility and depth, but TowerClimb is a particularly prominent example. Most games handle this by making the early levels the easiest, so you can learn without being punished too much, but in TowerClimb, while the difficulty does scale, the traversal mechanics are as useful on floor 1 as they are on floor 40. They're so deeply entwined with the controls that their difficulty can't be scaled nearly as easily. This results in most new players burning all their potions to get through the level and spending all their golden berries on jumps instead of revives, only to slip off a ledge and die. So, here we are in the Vault Caves. You can see how they got their name. It's full of these jumping blue beetles that are an absolute menace to society. If you manage to make it through all 3 levels of hell, you'll end up outside again. You need to swing on the ball by holding jump, and the game intelligently forces you to do it correctly before it lets you advance. You don't get much on the wheels though. You've got about 10 feet to figure out how it works, then you're looking down at an instant kill death pit. The physics of these are a little weird, so staying on is non-trivial. Welcome to Zardo land. Even though all it does is turn on the sign, it's a simple but important bit of game design to clue you in on these switches that you need to wheel past in order to activate. After riffing so much on the controls and the general accessibility of the game, I thought I should point out some of the more subtle things that the game does right. And despite how it might sound, I do actually like this game a lot. I wouldn't have played it for 600 hours if I didn't. I will say, Chapter 2 feels completely different from Chapter 1. The themes are a lot more imaginative than Fire World, Ice World, and Grass World, and the layouts are a lot more varied. I'd say it was an odd choice to put your best levels so far into the game, if I thought for a second that it was an actual choice. Chapter 1 was made first and finished sometime around 2012. Chapter 2 is probably just a result of them getting better at game development. It's like serial fiction where you can tell the author is getting better the longer the series goes on. Regardless, it had the intended effect of making me want to see what the next area had in store even as they got harder and harder. Once again, we're outside and teetering over instant death. We need to hit the switches. There's 4 of them. We also need to use these cannons, and counterintuitively, blasting yourself into the floor doesn't kill you. Sorry for the dead air, I just kinda like the soundtrack. Once you hit all 4, the way out is open. Once you get to the end of Zardo land, it brings you to this place, which is kind of weird because all it has is a door. Makes you wonder why this area is here in the first place. This brings us to somewhere else weird, and then out of nowhere, the bass starts pumping. I can tell you, when I was first climbing this murder tower, the last thing I expected to come across was a nightclub. There was this bouncer standing outside wearing Zardo's uniform, but apparently Zardo doesn't pay him enough because he just lets us inside anyway. We see him again inside, and he tells us that if we break anything, he'll throw us out, so no corrode potions. In here, you can't just run straight to the exit. You gotta collect all these Z coins to pay off the bouncer, all while avoiding the deadly dances of the giant club goers. You can even swing on the disco ball. Kinda makes sense why Zardo didn't want us in here. At the bottom there's this pool of, I don't know, Kool-Aid or something. Remember when I said you can have 1 or 2 revives? Well, this guy just sells you more. They're expensive, but if you've been saving up since Chapter 1, you might just make it through the next area. Yeah, super jumps. A lot of this area is about patience and timing. And sometimes you need to play a little risky. Despite the absurdity, the challenge here is actually pretty interesting. The game as a whole favors this methodical approach, and rushing around tends to make you die. This means the pace can be a little slow, especially in the earlier stages, but as the difficulty ramps up, planning your route and executing it perfectly is a major part of why this game kept me engaged even after hundreds of hours. The end of Club Z brings us here. This weird back room looking area. Well, that's interesting. And welcome to perhaps the biggest tonal shift I've ever seen in a video game. This area is pretty simple, just don't get seen. As long as you don't move while they're looking at you, they'll leave you alone. But I wouldn't recommend moving, even to get a blood-sucking leech off of you. Dying once is nothing, but if you piss these guys off, they will never leave you alone. Even if you're perfectly still, get too close and they'll come after you anyway. I cannot overstate how bad this can be. If you don't have climbing gloves, you can't climb fast enough to avoid them. Even with a ton of extra revives, it's pretty easy to lose them all here. The best part is, having one on you forces you to rush through the level and get them all on you. Narrowly saved by the teleport there. You will probably die here more than anywhere else. My general advice for this area is, don't screw up. This place is just brutal, and believe it or not, it can actually get worse, but I'll leave you in suspense. And just like that, all of our extra revives are gone. Next time we die, it's for real. But fortunately I found this one-time use item that lets me call the witch right to me. This is the last level of the temple, so I make a break for it. And here we are, in another level between levels. As soon as we climb these stairs, we trade our creepy church music for an eerie drone straight out of some black metal. And clearly, it doesn't want us to be here. Oh yeah, and the lava's back. That means even if we bought 1 billion extra revives from the Z-bar, we could still lose it all in this place. Welcome to Zenith. Yes, as the name implies, it is the last area. Funnily enough, it's actually easier than the temple. Or maybe that's just because by the time you can get here, you're already a god. Still, the lava makes this place very scary. Thankfully, even in death, my icy fingers remain clasped to that laser eye. The main reason it's actually easier is because it's a lot less chaotic. There's no enemies for one. You'll get the occasional guillotine spawning overhead, but unlike Temple, where one screw-up can force you to rush through the whole level, here you can take all the time you need. It's more like Club Z in that regard. Still, that doesn't mean it's easy. If you make it through all 3 levels of Zenith, you'll end up here. Certainly looks like we're at the top, doesn't it? So this floaty, shiny sword must be Zardo's treasure we've heard so much about. The absolute best thing about getting up here for the first time is how he insults you for playing on easy mode. And then he calls you a child. Here's what he says if you get here on normal mode. Not getting insulted is literally the only reason to play on normal. That's your reward. Yep, Zardo's the final boss. Being an unscrupulous wizard, he starts launching magic spells at us. Fortunately, his sword helps us defend against him. It's the video game classic, the ping pong ball boss fight. And when you do it, you get a great bass drop. This boss fight is a lot of things. Yeah, I bet you never knew how sexy Zardo was. And then the Eurobeat kicks in. I'm just gonna say, for all the effort it took to get up here, this boss fight did not disappoint. Then it's another ultimate blast, which ends in much the same way. I don't know, there's just not much I can say about this, like, you can just look at it. After that, it's back to the spells again, and then he tries to flatten you with a bowling ball. And then it's another volley. But TowerClimb is not a Nintendo game, he takes more than 3 hits. And for some reason, he spawns cannons. I always wondered why he summoned cannons for you even when he's trying to kill you with his big laser beam. But hey, I'm not the wizard. This part goes on entirely too long. Then it's back to high fives and magic balls. Except this time he's serious. And now the final volley. It's actually not as easy as it looks, and if you fail, you're going back to the cannons again. I've messed up this part before and just thrown myself into the lava because I couldn't be bothered to wait 5 minutes to try again. Seriously, if you mess up here, you'll feel it in your soul. This boss is already like 10 minutes long. And that's the end of the game. Except you may have noticed by this video's length that that's a lie. It took me about 40 hours to beat Zardo for the first time, but you really think that that's all this game had in store? Nope, wasn't done with me yet. We're treated to some credits featuring 2 people, and then finally at the top we can collect our victory. Yeah, you won't see this often. The game gives us a nice victory card to complement all of our death cards. Now let's talk about why I have 550 hours in this game and not the 40 it took me to quote-unquote beat it. The first culprit is this, the Centurial Trials. Even though the game could have ended there and been a totally appropriate length, there's still more modes you can unlock. The Centurial Trials is basically just Chapter 1, except randomized and 100 floors long. Also, unlike the main game, there's no easy mode, so you can only carry 1 revive and they're twice as expensive. You also start with some arcane gloves and a ton of potions. It's pretty straightforward, but even harder than just beating the game normally. But the trials aren't just Chapter 1, it's got some unique modifiers as well. The main thing you want to do is get some sort of mobility item. And that's where this worm comes in. It spawns randomly, and while it might seem like a bad thing, if you manage to kill it, it gives you an extremely useful item. Sometimes it's easier said than done, though. The kiloton is a lot more useful than it seems. It may look like a weapon, but it's actually a very useful mobility tool. When you swing it, it bumps you up a little bit. And just that little feature means you can suddenly traverse every obstacle in the trials without ever using an item or a potion. Every 10 levels you get Segmentation Plant, which is always nerve-wracking because those crush traps are instant kills. Doesn't matter if you're on floor 90, if you get hit by one of those, you're going all the way back. Having demonstrated that that's an instant kill, now we can try for real. Here's some more cryptic knowledge. If you kill 9 dogs on 1 level, you'll get a very powerful sword whose name I will not read in fear of angering the algorithm. Oh yeah, Zardo also shows up in the trials, but you're glad to see him because you really need his wand. crafting the King's Hook is probably the best thing you can do for yourself in the Trials. Not only is it extremely powerful, but it's also extremely fun. Also, you can use it to climb faster than arcane gloves by just repeatedly throwing it down. So yeah, that's the gist of the Trials. So, more on topic of why this game is obscure, I'd like to talk about publicity. The game came out in 2015, which was before the domination, but well within the growth of Twitch and other streaming platforms. In today's age, you can't ignore streaming as a means of reaching potential players, and that leads me to one problem with this game, if we must call it a problem. But yes, while TowerClimb is difficult, it's not meme difficult. Games like Getting Over It or Jump King are almost designed to fill this niche of what we might call streamer bait games, at risk of sounding overly cynical. In games like Getting Over It, the failures are fast, back-to-back, and often compounding in one big comedy of errors. They're difficult, but perhaps not as much as the Rage compilations might imply, because you're often only set back by a few obstacles, with a total reset being reserved as a finishing blow to the streamer's psyche. Meanwhile, in TowerClimb, there is no losing by degrees. If you die, you're going all the way back, and yet this is somehow less infuriating than the mercy that those games show you. Perhaps it's the knowledge of the lesser loss that makes the greater ones sting so much more, but who knows? I'm not a psychologist. Anyway, going back to my rant on the controls, both Getting Over It and Jump King have extremely basic controls, using only the mouse or the direction keys respectively, and yet both are capable of creating a rather dynamic challenge in spite of that. This is why even streamers who atrophy their gamer fingers after making one too many React videos can still pick it up. Additionally, the mechanics are simple enough to be understood at a glance, whereas I had to spend a couple minutes explaining TowerClimb's first. I've got a lot I could say about these games where failure appears to be the desired and designed result rather than success, such as how seeing someone fail so much can make you want to buy it yourself so you can prove that you're better than them, but I'll wrap this up and say that while TowerClimb is more difficult than either of those, it doesn't really convey its difficulty well and in a way that appeals to the average viewer. This is pure conjecture on my part, but while TowerClimb's not boring to watch, and hopefully you've proven me right by getting this far, the only people capable of making it interesting are people who are already skilled at the game, which requires a significant time investment. Deaths are few and far between, and while they might be funny when they happen, the following 30 minutes getting back wouldn't outweigh it. Spelunky also sends you all the way back to the start, but it had a rather substantial presence on streaming platforms in spite of that. It's an altogether smoother experience, and it's faster paced, true, but in my opinion, one of the major factors is, again, the spectacle of failure. Spelunky is considerably more chaotic than TowerClimb. It's possible to die having done absolutely nothing wrong purely through bad luck and level generation. This is so entertaining that there's a series on YouTube that's nothing but Spelunky deaths and Spelunky moments, which has more views than this video will ever get. The game's ability to create these cavalcades of disaster is a testament to the emergent depth that random generation can create, and why people can play the same game for hundreds of hours. This, however, does have the effect of it occasionally being unfair, but even that unfairness can become an asset. TowerClimb, in contrast, is very fair. It's just brutal. Very rarely does it feel like a death was out of my control, but perhaps this makes it predictable. Planning a route and executing it perfectly might be fun for me, but I'd conjecture that the people most likely to enjoy watching TowerClimb are already skilled TowerClimb players themselves and not regular viewers. This isn't to say that the game is bad because it's not accessible or doesn't appeal to streamers, quite the opposite as far as I'm concerned, but it's worth noting that this does hamper its ability to attract new players. But to try and put a lid on this discussion, it's safe enough to say that TowerClimb simply doesn't appeal to most players through reasons I've hopefully made self-evident. Back to the game, there's also these doors around that take you to harder levels but advance 2 floors instead of 1. I generally don't do them because they're a good way to die, and half of them take more time than just completing 2 levels normally. But when I have this hammer, I can do that. This thing really isn't that useful, but if we find Zardo again, we can shoot it with his wand and turn it into this. Funnily enough, for all the effort, this thing also isn't that useful, at least compared to the King's Hook. You can use it to chop through blocks, but you can also charge it up and fly away. This mostly results in getting you killed by chopping through lava, spikes, or dropping a block on your head. It's generally safer to just not use it. But if you're the kind of genius who manages to get his King's Hook stuck in a wall, then it's better than nothing. Fortunately, literally the next level, I find another worm so I can get my kiloton back. I was gonna make a montage of the last 50 floors, but it ended up looking like a strobe light, so I've decided to spare you. Here we are on floor 100. Yeah, I made a new King's Hook. Considering it took an hour and 30 minutes to get here, it would be very embarrassing if we died. You know, it took me about another 40 hours to beat the trials, but since then I must have cleared them at least 15 times. Because I realized it was a great way to occupy myself while finishing the audiobook version of The Wheel of Time. I spent at least 200 hours doing this. We give this guy a cake, which I won't explain further, then use the ascender to fly up here. Yeah, the fall damage detector is a little messed up with the ascender. So after spending about 100 hours in the trials, I was prepared for the game's next challenge. Or at least I thought I was. You might remember this thing. Well, it's part of the so-called legendary ending. And if we want to get the legendary ending, we're forced to start at the bottom. No shortcuts. But it's actually for the best because we're gonna need every golden berry we can find. We get lucky and the worm shows up so we can get the kill-a-ton in the normal game. The best part is it's completely free. In this run, crafting the King's Hook takes more berries than I'm comfortable spending. I'm so desperate for berries I break open these wasp hives too. Even though it tends to get you killed. On top of the kill-a-ton, we got 2 pairs of climbing gauntlets. Can't get much luckier than that. We need to fight her again, which is mostly just waiting, but make sure you grab these on your way out. Ah yes, the crying statue. Truth is, these were his eyes all along. In return, he gives us a legend fragment. It doesn't do anything useful, but we need it. His fragment is the only reason you're forced to start at Chapter 1. Here's some more hidden knowledge. If you go up here instead of immediately climbing to the right, you'll find these 2 chests for free. As you can see, we've managed to amass quite a few berries. So from here, we just need to play the game like normal until we reach the entrance to the Vault Caves. Then you go over here, and the kill-a-ton is very handy for this because it saves us on corrode potions. And there's fragment number 2. You might recall that we only have 6 inventory slots, and now 2 of them are dedicated to these useless orbs. You have Vault Caves, then the entrance to Zardo land, and then we're here. If you're extremely observant, you may have noticed it earlier, but there's a door up here. We can get to it by hitting this switch, but instead of going in the door, we go all the way back. Welcome to Hell, or the very appropriately named Brutal Boiler Room. To get in, you need to pass this gate, which takes all your items. And yes, that includes revives. Any death here means we've failed the run, and we need to go all the way back to Chapter 1. Nothing you picked up before getting here is going to be any help to you. Your only friend is this item, the winch shot. All of the walls are instantly fatal, so you need to make it through without touching any of them. I cannot talk enough about this area. It is the great slayer of legend fragment runs. When I was first trying to get through this area, I must have died here at least 50 times. The inputs are very precise. If you miss timing on a throw or accidentally throw it diagonally instead of straight above you, you're probably just gonna die. If you're trying to beat a legend fragment run, you don't start at the bottom, you start at the shortcut to Chapter 2. Then you come here to die once every 10 minutes until miraculously your fingers adapt to the wind shot and you've memorized the route. Maybe, just maybe after that, you'll be able to start the legend run for real. But probably not. Let's try again. Funny thing is, to get into Brutal Boiler, you don't even need to hit that switch. You just need to climb around. I have no idea if this is intentional or not, but it's way faster, so that's the way I do it. Even though the gate steals all of your potions, you can still pre-drink a few jumps. It takes about 40 minutes to get here, by the way, and you'll feel that investment every time you retract the winch. Your hands will be sweating, your face will be 2 inches from the screen, and you'll be holding your breath the entire time. Which just makes you play worse, and you know it's making you play worse, so you tell yourself to calm down, but all that does is distract you, and then suddenly you forget which buttons to press, and your sweaty finger slips off the key, and then you die. I almost saved that one. I grabbed the wrong mine because they're on top of each other. Oh boy, I get to do it again. Maybe Quasimodo will be the lucky climber. I've done this before, I swear. I know I've died here like 3 times already, but I can't just ignore a triple berry. This whole area sort of feels like a Super Meat Boy level, except instead of restarting instantly, you need to wait 40 minutes before you get to try again. At least when you're on the winch, you can just hang and carefully plan your next move, but these mines don't give you that luxury. And we've made it. You can use the winch to climb up those stairs, but I prefer the safe route. Thankfully, we get all of our items back and we get to keep the winch shot. It will be very useful in the upcoming areas. But first, we need to get the legend fragment, and of course it can't be somewhere convenient, it needs to be all the way over here. Make sure you have at least one corrode potion, because otherwise your legend run would end here. And now we've reached the point where we need to get rid of useful items so we can fit the legend fragments. Now we just need to get through Zardo land normally. The winch shot is kinda weird. Ah, yes, the suspiciously useless place. I'm sure absolutely nothing would happen if we climbed up here. Damn, I wish I could read. Yeah, it's Zardo's house. Don't get too distracted, because what we want is in the attic. Honestly, after blowing up his ceiling, is it any wonder he hates people like us? Yeah, that's about what I expected. Zardo in a basketball jersey. Yes, you need to fight Zardo in his dreams through a game of basketball. Honestly, this is when I fell in love with the game. The first one to get 11 points wins. He gets harder the more you score until he starts flying all over the place. But he's no match for my b-ball skills. I know I made it look easy, but he's actually pretty hard until you get the ball handling down. Now we can leave. Don't forget the legend fragment, I've lost a run that way. You can also take the basketball with you. It's actually a weapon. If you dribble it, the thing gets red hot. The next fragment is right over here. Now we've got 5 fragments in our inventory. I'm gonna need to keep the winch shot in my hands, so sorry, basketball. We don't need to do anything special in Club Z, but we do want to stop by this guy to pick up some extra revives. We're gonna need them where we're going. But I'm only going to spend half of my berries. Can you find the secret area? Welcome to Arcade. This is honestly my favorite area in the whole game. The tiles are constantly changing, so you need to keep on your toes. I love this area. I love the music, I love the aesthetics, and the challenge. You have a second before the tiles lock in to react to the new layout, so it's a test of your skills to quickly find the best place to stand. Sometimes you can advance super quickly, but other times it spawns nothing but death blocks in your path. The winch shot we got from Brutal Boiler is very handy here. If all the other stuff wasn't enough, Arcade 2 has giant holes in the floor so we could lose all 8 of our revives instantly. Fortunately, Arcade 3 is a little safer. And did you see that? I accidentally threw my winch shot into a death block and it deleted it. There's no door up here, so we gotta go back down. And down here is fragment number 6. I take my gloves off so I can fit it in my inventory instead. It makes me climb painfully slow, but you saw what happened to my wind shot. If it's in my inventory, it's safe, but if I get zapped by a death block and drop it, it'll get deleted. If that happened, the run would instantly be over, because I need all of them. On this final climb, there's no walls, so it's a lot more dangerous. There goes my gloves. I really would have preferred to have them in Temple, but it's better than losing a fragment. That's Arcade for you, and that's 2 of our revives down. After that, it's back to the Temple of Devotion. It's not any easier, but at least it's got tons of berries. Luckily, I found some basic gloves in a chest. Just that is enough to give us an edge on the Watchers. Behind Brutal Boiler, Temple of Devotion is the second biggest run ender for Legend Fragment runs. And this is why. I accidentally jumped and now this thing is on me forever. That wouldn't be so much of a problem if it weren't for how we needed to get the 7th and final fragment. We need to ring all of these bells. And doing that while being followed is a little tough. Yeah, that's fun. This is why we have the extra revives. Okay, that's all the bells. In a stroke of the only good luck I've got in this level, the witch is right here. Which is very good, because I would have needed to find her, because the next part requires corrode potions. If we ring all the bells, it opens this door. And brings us to the Coliseum. The 7th fragment is right here, so you better not miss it. This is why we needed more corrode potions. This place is also a bit of a run-ender. Basically, we just need to defeat a bunch of rounds of enemies. At first it starts out with easy stuff like dogs and rats, but then it gets a little harder. At least it gives us an opportunity to get some revenge on those Watchers. We make it to round 9, but since we had such a rough time getting here, all of our extra revives are gone. And I made the absolutely harebrained mistake of being on the wrong side of these dogs when they spawned. And then at the critical moment I blow it. It's been a while since I attempted this run, okay? It's not as easy as I make it look, and I'm pretty sure I'm not making it look easy. Maybe it's George's lucky day. Well, this time I managed to make probably the best item in the game, the gun boots. Yes, it is a Downwell reference. They are very useful. They even double as a weapon. Anyway, remember when I said like 25 minutes ago the temples can get even worse? Well, if you're unlucky enough, you'll get this. Corrupted Watchers constantly float towards you and will immediately aggro if you're anywhere in their sphere. Doesn't matter if you're standing still, they'll come after you. Also, these corpses make you bounce. I can kill them with my gun boots though, they just take 13 hits. Still, I'm better off just running away. There's like a dozen of them on this level. Fortunately, the level with the bells is normal. And this time I managed to ring all the bells without alerting any of the Watchers. And there goes round 9. I'd like to introduce you to Brobash. He is an absolute menace. If you get even remotely close to him, he'll chop your face off, so you need to do this little dance around him. Fortunately, the gun boots make this a little easier, but he's still a problem. He's even such a menace to society, he throws my fragments all over the place. But he's dead. Or not. Yeah, what'd you think? You were the only guy who could use revive potions? Fortunately, I could cheese him here a little bit, but getting gun boots is extremely rare. He drops his scimitar, which is hilarious because it can swing as fast as you can click, but also because Zenith is next and it has no enemies. Now we need to say goodbye to our gunboot so it can hold all 7 fragments. But we've also got to say goodbye to this run, for now, because I've also got to talk about this, Colossus. Just like the Trials, it's another game mode. This is literally an entire game mode maybe 1% of players will ever be able to unlock. It's an entire game mode dedicated to combat, which is already kind of wonky enough to begin with. The rules are simple. Kill everything. If you do, you'll advance a wave. Odd waves are normal, even waves are bosses. Usually it spawns 2, but you can get more depending on how unlucky you are. Most I've ever gotten is 5. The hardest part of this mode is you need to deal with Bro Bash all the time. And not just Bro Bash plus a bunch of bosses. If you're really unlucky, you can even get double or triple Bro Bash. If you manage to defeat the bosses, you'll get to roll for an item at the top. Most of the time it's useless garbage, but it occasionally gives you something useful. These are in the garbage category, and I'm not even gonna bother explaining them because they are Satan. Every wave you'll get a golden berry, which you'll mostly use to buy extra revives. Except they get more expensive every time you buy one. So this place is horrible, but do you have any idea how many waves you need to fight? 50. I'm gonna say it now, I think Colossus is harder than the Legend Fragment run. I've only beaten it once in my entire life. If you are incredibly lucky, you will get an Ascender, or at least the means to create one with a wand and exiled blade. Unlike the Centurial Trials, it is invaluable here. Suddenly, you can start going blender mode on everything. The Ascender constantly wants to throw you in the air, but you can stay on the ground by constantly storing it and taking it out. As long as you don't let go of X, it stays spinning. Also, you can pre-charge it by holding X, then taking it out while it's already spinning. It's powerful, but you're still gonna die. So I spent about 8 hours playing nothing but Colossus. You can see all the garbage I've accumulated by making it this far. I've got the Ascender and gun boots. This is about as powerful as you can be. So, you wanna know what happens at wave 50? You don't win, you get another boss. 2 bosses, actually. And they are the most unfair things ever designed by the wretched hands of mankind. They shoot lava and laser beams, follow you around at supersonic speeds, and they've also got revive potions. This is like a Dark Souls boss, except the bonfire is 50 miles away. You need to be extraordinarily skilled and lucky to even make it this far. You are never going to reach these guys enough to get their patterns and behaviors down, so really your only hope is to have saved up enough revives or have a big stockpile of invulnerability orbs you got by chance from the block. I went into this with 3 revives. I managed to kill one of them and get the other one to use their last revive. Yeah, so I died. Also, I counted. He was only 1 hit away from death. The best part is, dying to these guys doesn't even have the decency to give you a unique death card. Whatever, I showed you the bosses. When you win, it looks like this. I'm done here. Now, back to the Legend Fragment run. Now that our whole inventory is dedicated to Legend Fragments, we need to beat this whole area without any items. Thankfully, I'm just enough of a gamer to do it. I could have tried to dodge that, but I'd rather die and revive than fall into lava. We still need to fight Zardo, but I've done this about 1,000,000 times at this point. Now we just need to put all the fragments into their slots. And here it is. After all of that, we're at the Hidden Keep. There's another spell gate here, and it's not like we have any items for it to take, but it does steal our potions. This is why we didn't want to spend all of our berries on extra revives in Club Z. The game confiscates items, but not berries, and we can use all of those berries on extra revives. I think 16's a pretty good number. Yeah, it's her again. And here it is, the final boss fight. Except she's not like Zardo, where we could just ping-pong ball him to death. We actually gotta chop her to bits. Just like the Colossus bosses, this is a complicated fight that takes several hours on a good day to even reach, and so you'll have no chance to actually learn her moves or combat them. But this is why we work so hard to save up berries the entire run. With 16 revives, it's pretty hard to lose. The fight's pretty interesting regardless, and maybe it's a bit anticlimactic to just face tank everything and rely on post-revive invincibility, but for all the effort it took to get up here, I am not risking a loss. I guess this video was supposed to be more of an analysis than just a walkthrough, so now's a good time as any. Ultimately, this brings me to the crux of my argument. TowerClimb was not designed for new players. It was designed for skilled players with little thought of the pipeline between new and skilled. I'm an abject weirdo. I was actually determined enough to make it, but I have to say, the vast majority of players are likely not. In true roguelike fashion, it requires a wealth of knowledge you'll only pick up your 100th time through, and it's about as accessible as a concrete wall. It's a rare breed of game that puts the vast bulk of its content at the end instead of the beginning, but ultimately rewards a determined player with a wealth of content. If I must make grand sweeping statements, personally I like it better than Spelunky, but if you had to ask me which I thought was the better game, I'd have to answer Spelunky. Hopefully that confuses you as much as it does me. Anyway, this chick is still alive. Yeah, she's got like 50 hit points or something. Unfortunately, I've run out of things to say, but fortunately, she dies just in time. And just through this door is the end of the game. It's the same credits as last time, but at the top you get this victory card instead. Just look at how swole George is. But that's still not the end. Don't worry, it's nothing major. If you beat the game, the trials, the Colossus, and the legendary ending, you will get this, Chapter 1 Plus. It's actually not all that different, except you start with a ton of mobility items. Also, the witch almost never appears. But if you're good enough to unlock this mode, that's probably not an issue. The main difference is, when you fight Christelle, yeah that's her name, you get this instead. That's a good question. That's a good point. The fight's a little remixed, summoning motherhounds instead of fish and dropping guillotines on your head, right before summoning a ton of watchers. Although they're not actually that hard, because all you need to do is avoid them. You need to put the orbs on 5 pillars this time. Then instead of raising the lava, she summons this. It's actually pretty hard in this confined space. Ow. Yeah, but you can usually kill it by tanking a revive. And that's basically it. You can go on to beat Zardo if you want, but it's all the same. So that's TowerClimb. Now the question becomes, why did I make this video? You might assume that I just wanted to show off, and perhaps if you're less cynical, assume I wanted to share something with you that I enjoy. Well, if you're either of those hypothetical people, you're wrong. I made this video to complain. TowerClimb came out in 2015, but it's still in development. The devs have been teasing a Chapter 3 for 7 years. I need it. I need Chapter 3. I want to feel like I did when I first stepped into this tower. This is a cry for help. Please, please release Chapter 3. Okay, that's everything. Bye.